All righty. Good morning. Welcome to the Manoa Career Center's second virtual law schools fair. I am Kay Jernigan. I am one of the career counselors at our center, and I will also be your moderator for today's educational panel session. With me is Brent Fujinaka, who will also monitor Q&A, along with Thomas Tutsumoto and Jenny Chow, who will be assisting with back-end logistics. The Manoa Career Center is here for students and recent graduates. We welcome you to virtually meet with a career counselor after this fair for further assistance with graduate or professional school plans, resume and interview help, and planning your next steps. Just a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded to share with students or alumni who are not able to join us today. Anyone interested in viewing the panel session with subtitles, please click live transcript, show subtitles, and you should be able to view the subtitles at the bottom of the screen. This is the Virtual Law Schools Fair, and the purpose of this event is to provide UH Manoa students the opportunity to gather information from representatives regarding admissions, program highlights, and financial aid. We will start the virtual fair with an educational panel session. Panelists from different law schools or programs will share information on 3 areas: why law school, tips for applying to law school, and tips on financing your law degree. Panelists will address each topic, and if time allows, we will open it up for Q&A after each topic is presented. The second part of the fair from 10:30 to 12 will be our virtual booths or breakout sessions. This will consist of individual schools or programs holding their own Zoom meetings to meet with potential students or alum and share about their specific program, and hopefully some time for Q&A. For this educational panel session, if you have a question, we ask that you submit your questions in the Q&A section only. Do not use the chat function, as questions or items may be missed. And please wait your turn to have your questions answered. Keep in mind that all questions and answers can be seen by attendees. We will get started with our first set of panelists. The first topic, why law school? We have Susan from Columbia Law School. We also have University of Colorado Law, University of New Hampshire, Franklin Pierce School of Law, University of Oregon School of Law, and University of the Pacific McGeorge School of Law. You can go ahead and get started.
Thanks. I'll jump in unless somebody else wants to take the lead. I'll just say there's so many different reasons to go to law school. The most obvious one would be to be a lawyer, whether that's a human rights lawyer or a corporate lawyer or environmental lawyer. But there's also other reasons to go to law school. Maybe you're interested in public policy, you want to go into government. Maybe you're an aspiring politician or a judge, maybe you're an entrepreneur. There's so many different career paths that you can take with the law degree. There's a lot of different reasons why somebody might be interested in a particular area of the law. Perhaps you're really interested in environmental concerns, maybe human rights. Perhaps as a child, you went through or witnessed your parents going through a divorce or custody proceedings, or maybe you know someone who's gone through housing issues or immigration issues. Perhaps you're a social worker and you just want more tools to help your clients. There's so many different reasons that you might be interested in going to law school. For us, and this probably applies to a lot of the schools on the panel, when we're reading your application, we do want to know that you have thought through going to law school. So we do like there to be some explanation as to why you want to go to law. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're writing your personal statement. However, there's an asterisk to that comment, and that's that you don't actually have to declare, exactly what you want to go into in law school. There is time in law school to try different things out. First year is a set curriculum at most schools, but second year and third year, you have a lot of choice and you don't declare a major. So you can pursue just one area in law school. For instance, if you were interested in international law, you can just take a bunch of classes in that your second year and third year of law school, or you could just take a variety of classes, maybe international law, environmental law, immigration law, gender and sexuality law. There's a lot of different things that you could study in law school, and you don't have to have that completely decided when you enter law school. And all schools do have great academic advisors and career advisors that sort of help you figure out, what your next step is after law school. Another thing that I just want to touch on in going to law school, what law school can provide you with is some great skills that you can carry out into your life. For instance, in law school, you really learn how to dissect a text. Your critical writing and thinking skills improve dramatically. Just the ability to get up and speak spontaneously improves. And of course, you learn how to read and analyze things much quicker. Ultimately, what you need to think about when you're going to law school is where do your passions lie? What are your interests? What would you like to do eventually? And will law school provide you with the tools that are provided in law school? Will they help you reach your goals? Because it is a big investment of time and money to go to law school. So it is something that you want to think through and really do that sort of cost benefit analysis for yourself. And some ways that students do that is to take a gap year. At our law school, we are fine if you don't take a gap year, but it is something that can help you if you want to work in some area of the law or shadow a lawyer. That can be really helpful to help you decide if you want to go. So that's about all that I have right now. So I don't know who wants to take the reins.
I can jump in real quick because I actually want to talk about something that you just mentioned. I think it's a personal decision. I'm Trish from University of New Hampshire out here in New Hampshire, probably as far away from all of you you can get. But it's a great time to go to law school, and I kind of want to focus on the timing, right? Because everything that's going on in society right now, everything that's going on politically and technology-wise, there are so many different ways to practice the law. COVID has taught us that we can be remote, that we can be, court hearings can be remote, that you don't need to be, at your clients or in an office all the time. We're seeing technologies change so quickly with intellectual property issues. And, we just saw Fortnite and Apple getting a huge lawsuit over, the app right there. There's so many different things going on society-wise. Social media, personal likenesses. It's really a cutting edge time to go into the law and to practice things that you love, like Susan just mentioned. I think that's really important and to notice that. You can find your niche. You don't need to declare a major like you do in undergrad to go into law school. You may find a passion in law school. You may find your passion when you've been 5 years out. I went to law school for business and my passion was animal law, and that's what I do now and what I teach now. So it's really such a dynamic, moving area of law. And if you want to go to law school and now is your time, go do it, because not only how you practice has changed, but what we practice changes. And the law touches everything. So I just wanted to make a quick talk about that, because I think it's just a really exciting time to go into law school, to become a lawyer, and to really make change. So I will pass it off to the next panelist.
Sure. I mean, I can jump in here a little bit and kind of riff off what people have been saying so far. But I think the key thing to remember is that, why go to law school is really an individual question, right? Everyone's going to be driven by different things. That's part of what makes, going to law school and makes our incoming classes so exciting, is that everyone's coming in for different reasons with different backgrounds, different ideas. But I think, one thing to keep in mind also is that your reason for going to law school could shift once you get to law school. I had friends in my 1L class that one of them was going to do criminal law. His dad had done criminal law, and that was going to be his driving force. And he got into criminal law from day one and absolutely hated that class. And he ended up doing oil and gas work. And, I always say there are people out there that do tax law. I'm not sure many people go into law school with a passion for tax law, but it's one of those things that you maybe discover when you get in there and decide that It's something that really drives you and is really exciting. And, you know, I think another thing to keep in mind with just from my experience going to law school that I kind of took with me is that, you know, being a lawyer and the law is a service profession, and, you know, you're working on behalf of other people. And I think that's one of the things that makes it such an exciting and, you know, powerful profession, is that the legal system in this country is sometimes very confusing and oftentimes not very intuitive. And most people lack the sophistication to be able to navigate it on their own. And that's where you come in. And so, you know, being a lawyer, you're in a unique position to be able to help people navigate that. I remember when I was in law school, I did a criminal law clinic during my 3rd year. And, you know, I had clients that were counting on me. And it's so interesting to go from that 1st year experience of sitting in law school classes and talking about the theoretical aspects of criminal law and what's a legal search and seizure and all that stuff. Once you actually get into a courtroom and you're actually representing someone and there's someone standing next to you that's really, you know, depending on what you're doing, it really drives home the idea that people are counting on you. And like I said, it's a service profession. So yeah, I guess I'll kind of leave it with that and kind of let the next person chime in.
I think, I mean, my colleagues summed it up pretty well. I'll just add a couple of points. When I think of the question about why law, I have to think about why now. And I think that because the world really doesn't exist without lawyers. When you think about our politicians, when you think about all the businesses, and you think about rulemaking and policy making and lobbyists and things of that nature, oftentimes they're lawyers and or they have law degrees. We need your voice, we need your experiences, we need your ideas, your thoughts, and your kind of creativity in this space. I mean, the law's been around for a really long time, but it's ever evolving. And so we're at a pivotal point in our kind of history as a country and as a world. And so when you think about healthcare and you think about legislation and you think about constitutional law and you think about business and you think about social and racial justice, or, you know, social and just a racial reckoning. If you think about water rights and environmental law and things of that nature, all those things are impacted by lawyers. I also would just note that, you know, I think we need diversity in the profession. We need, you know, people of different ages and different religions and different gender identities and different gender expressions. I also think that it's important to think about the fact that many people want to have an impact on the world. And I don't think there's a better way to have an impact. I mean, there are multiple ways, right? But I think being a lawyer, you really are with someone. I think David just said this, but you know, to the extent that there are days when you literally are in someone's space on their best day. It could be, you know, being a family lawyer and they're, you know, you're helping them with an adoption, or they're starting their first business and you're helping them with all the paperwork to kind of be registered and things of that nature. But you're also with people on their worst days. And sometimes you're the only person that can help them get through that in terms of navigating a messy divorce and or, you know, the breaking up of a business or things of that nature. And so I think it's really important to understand the impact that you could have by pursuing this professional degree. I think the last thing would be that, you know, it's the timing of all this is super, super important. I think Susan started with this at some point about, or maybe it was, I can't remember, but someone talked about timing. And I think what's most important is to think about when you ask yourself, why law, you know, why now, you know, think about the fact that you need to be emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially ready, because it's an intellectual boot camp of sorts, and it's a life altering degree. It's a professional degree that will really change the direction of your family. And for those of you that are first generation, that's just something that you really kind of want to take in and be proud of that you're here today to start that part of the journey. But I think there are just a number of reasons, as you can hear from the panelists, to consider in terms of why you might want to go to law school. I think for those of us that have gone, we know it's kind of changed our lives, and we know it changed the lives of people around us. So I will end there.
All right, thank you. We actually, we're missing one panelist for this topic. So we'll go ahead and open it up for Q&A, and we do already have a Q&A, and it's a great one. And I think anyone, I mean, you know, you can answer, or multiple people can answer this live. The question is, how can I best figure out what type of law I want to study?
I mean, I can kind of jump in. I mean, the first thing to realize is that you don't need to know that when you go in. it's totally fine to go into law school knowing you want to be a lawyer, but you don't necessarily know the area that you want to go into. And also realize, that first year most law schools, it's going to be a really broad cross section of courses. You're going to take contract law, criminal law, tort law, civil procedure, property law. So you're going to take a really broad set of courses that first year. And part of that is to build a foundation for, the other 2 years that you're going to be in law school. But part of it also is to expose you to different areas of law and provide kind of a jumping off point for other experiences.
And following up on what David said, I think as you go forward, you're going to have two opportunities. One is to find out what you do want to do, maybe, or what you don't want to do. All of us have tremendous clinical programs, externships, which is when you actually go out in the field and you work for a lawyer in a legal capacity in exchange for credits, or internships in the summers. And all of us are going to help you figure out what's best for you, based upon what you think you want to do. I'm one of those people who in law school found out what I didn't want to do. So that kind of shut one door, but left a whole bunch more open. So it's really so flexible. And like I said before, you may not know what you want to do until you've been practicing for 3 or 4 years. Sometimes it just falls in your lap. So it's very fluid. And I think that's a great thing about the law.
I would just jump in and add, I think David's example was a perfect one of his friend that wanted to do criminal law and realized they hated it. I think the big thing for all of us is that we are looking for students and applicants to come in open-minded, because I think what you're going to find is that you're exposed to many, many different things in your first year of law school. And there will be some areas of law that you actually didn't even know existed if you pay attention to the programming that the law schools are offering in terms of bringing alumni back or judges and things of that nature. And you're going to really have this huge opportunity to kind of explore. And so I think the big thing about those 3 or 4 years that you're in law school is to really take advantage of the different opportunities that the Career Development or Career Services Office will offer you in terms of potential internships and externships, but also just meeting with lawyers and kind of hearing what they do and being mentored by them. Because I really do think that for many, many students, they come in with this really fixed idea of what they want to do and who they want to be. And as David pointed out, and Patricia, once you get in there, you're like, whoa, I cannot see myself doing this every day for 10 years or 5 years or what have you. The last point before Susan goes is that I will note that I have definitely found over the last probably 20 something years that my friends from law school, but also the students I've worked with, many of them actually change their mind based on the job that they first get upon graduation. And so again, the idea that you really just need to be open-minded in that you don't have to fixate on what you actually want to do when you're choosing the law schools to apply to, because that's going to come to you naturally through your experiences.
Yeah, thanks. Tracy, that's actually, I was gonna say that I've been out of law school. I graduated in the dark ages back in the early 90s, and certainly looking at my classmates and different career paths that they've taken, some started in a law firm and then went into government. Some have their own businesses now, some are back in academia. It really changes. So I guess just to sum up, there's a lot of different junctures at which you can sort of figure out what you want to do as a lawyer or with your law degree. And the first would be before you go to law school, maybe having an internship or just shadowing somebody, but that's not necessary. First year, you are going to probably have a set curriculum, but you do have other opportunities where you have, speakers. You can talk to career services and student services about different areas of interest. There's possibilities to work on journals where you can go in depth in different, or maybe moot court also, where you can explore certain different areas of the law. And then of course the externships and clinics and summer internships to try out different things. And I see students, doing like a human rights internship maybe after first year, and then they're maybe at a firm after the second year summer, and then they end up doing, something in government as their job. But there's just so many different junctures because the law does have a lot of different touch points, and a law degree is a great tool to have. It's an empowering tool, and it does give you, it's very portable. It gives you a lot of flexibility in what career path you choose.
Yeah, and like I'll just speak from my experience going to law school not that recently, I guess anymore, but like when I was in law school, I did an internship in the family court. I did the criminal law clinic, and I also spent a summer working for like the local government attorney's office. So there are, I mean, even just within my experience, just trying different things. And again, some of them were, it was sort of an exercise in eliminating things. I realized for me, I could not work in family court long term, but you know, there's just tons of different opportunities you can do when you're in law school there.
All righty, thank you guys, and thanks for sharing your personal stories as well. We have time for one more question, and it's in the Q&A. It is, what is the time scale of law school? For example, is the intellectual property law program take the same amount of time as any other program?
So I think we probably need to explain a little bit about how it actually works, because I think Patricia pointed out the fact that you actually don't have to pick a major, for example. And so if you're interested in an intellectual property concentration, for example, that generally is on top of your required courses. Those are what we will call electives. And so some schools are called emphasis programs, some schools are called concentration, and it's all part of the either 3-year full-time program or 4-year part-time program, depending on which program you enroll in. The only other thing I'll note before my colleagues jump in is that please note that every ABA law school does not have a list of concentrations or emphasis programs. And so what you want to do is you want to kind of do your homework and go, to the website, talk to the law school itself and kind of see, do you have mentors in this space? What type of courses do you offer in this space, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just one of those other things that it's just a concentration program or an emphasis program. Some schools might have other projects related to their specialty areas or centers of distinction and things of that nature. But again, it's generally part of the same law school curriculum.
All right, does anyone else want to answer that or address that question? If not, we can go ahead and move on to the next set of panelists. All righty, thank you. So next we are featuring Albany Law School, Harvard Law School, Seton Hall Law School, Thomas Jefferson School of Law, University of Hawaii at Manoa, William S. Richardson School of Law. So all panelists that are here, if you can go ahead and turn on your cameras, and you'll be addressing or share information about tips for applying to law school.
So Loretta, if you don't mind, maybe I'll start since you have home court advantage over here. But so I'm from, as Kay Jernigan from the Career Services said, we're from Seton Hall outside of New York. So really excited to be here. A couple of things to think about. And I'm pretty certain my colleagues and I can talk about this all day long. So I'm really going to keep my thoughts pretty succinct, but certainly happy to answer any questions because I know that Loretta and I are not going to be able to cover all of our tips in this sort of 5-minute, the 7-minute session. But my first tip for all of you that are applying to law school is to be organized. So unlike the undergraduate admissions process, if you can think back to that, law schools actually don't have uniform processes, requirements, or deadlines. Each school can set their own. So it's really important that you gather your information for each of the schools that you're interested in and that you're applying to, and keep it in a place or a manner that makes the most sense for you to be able to gather that information and compare and contrast. And specifically to make sure that you know when all the deadlines are for each of those institutions. And I know that there's probably way cooler tech gadgets and tools and organizers out there, but I still believe in spreadsheets. So big fan of Excel. Get your school list together in Excel with the different information like different deadlines, different application requirements, different scholarship information, and really sort of set yourself up for success by staying organized. And if you're organized, it's actually going to put you in a better spot to get your application in early without having to sacrifice the quality of your application, right? And then my second tip, before I turn it over to Loretto, is that you want to pay attention to each component of the application, right? As I mentioned earlier, each school is going to ask for different things, but if we're asking for something, it's because it's important to us, right? We're not just going to make you jump through hoops. to fill out paperwork or write an essay or send a resume if we're actually not considering it or taking it seriously. So please don't skimp on any other parts of the application, like the resume or letters of recommendation, just because you think you have a killer personal statement or really strong numbers. You want to take each component seriously and make sure that all pieces of your application work together to add value to your file and continue to paint you in a strong and positive light to the admissions officer. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to Loretto for his thoughts and certainly leave time for questions.
Yeah, so just going off of the idea that each part of the application is important, there just realize also there's no sort of cookie cutter application that you can put together. Don't try to predict what you think the admissions committee wants to see, because each of you will have a unique story, a unique application that you will bring to them. And so really making sure that you maximize on each piece to talk about the different aspects of you, because your transcripts will say so much with a letter grade, but your professors can say so much more in how they describe you. Your personal statement is personal to you, and your resume can say a bit more about the details around all of the amazing things that you've done, and kind of connect you to the idea of transitioning to law school as that next step. So pay attention to each of them and put your story out there. I think oftentimes we try to anticipate what we think they want to know, but they want to find out who you are. They always look for the diversity that you can bring to the school. And so I would say be you, because what you bring is going to be very special. That being said, as you apply to the many law schools, the fees can really rack up. So my tip there would be get the fee waivers as much as you can if you can find them. If you qualify for fee waiver with LSEC, go and get that. Get the cost of the tests out of the way, the cost of your CAS reports out of the way, because the CAS report fees can really add up as you're applying to several schools. So be sure you have all of that mapped out. So when you're putting together that spreadsheet, do line up the fee waivers if you have them, keep that cost down, because, and this is not even getting to the cost of law school itself. This is just trying to get yourself through the door. So that those costs can really rack up. And you know, for a standard set of schools, just taking the test plus your CAS reports, that can run you easily $500. And that's probably not even the 10 schools that you're looking at that would cost even more. So really, if you can get those fee waivers, some schools don't even have application fees. And so be sure to go and get those. And I think one of the other things I wanted to say was take a moment to learn about those schools to make sure that you have that match with them, because when it comes to the cost, you want to make sure that you're going to do well in terms of putting together that application so that it's something that they will be receptive to. And, you know, sometimes as you learn about the law schools, maybe you'll find out today that you are from Hawaii, but Hawaii's law school isn't for you. And I do want you to find kind of that match for you, because you want to be a lawyer, you want to go to law school, and you want to flourish in the place that kind of works best for you. So I'm going to leave it at that. And we can answer some questions unless you have anything else to add.
So the only thing that I'll add, and I think we both alluded to this, is that when you're ready to apply, it's really important to apply as early as possible without sacrificing the quality of your application. But really make sure that you're not waiting until as close to the deadline. Because believe it or not, some schools actually may not even have a deadline. Most of us are going on a rolling admission, but you really want to make sure that you apply early. Now, the following question usually is, well, what's early, right? Because everybody has all their own deadlines. So a good rule of thumb to think about is either Thanksgiving or Christmas break, for those of you that are still in school, of your senior year. For those of you that have already graduated, of the year prior to your entry, right? So right now, our students who are looking for fall 2022, their deadline, hopefully for them internally, is either December 31st, 2021, or Thanksgiving, right? And I always say shoot for Thanksgiving because if life happens, then you have Christmas to fall back on and you're still way ahead of the curve. We're seeing a trend of applications this year similar to last year, where it seems to be a good number of folks are applying to law school. So there's going to be a high volume of applications again. So you really want to set yourself up for success by getting that application in early. So just think about that. That spreadsheet will help you understand what early means. But it'll also make sure that you don't get your application in too early where it's actually not a strong application and it doesn't paint the best picture. So, but with that, we'll turn it over to the questions and then certainly happy to answer any of those questions.
All righty, so there are a couple in Q&A. The first, how many law schools should I apply to?
So that's a really good question, and I'm going to give a very lawyerly answer, which is it depends. That's a really personal choice, right? It's something that you have to think about. I know Loretto alluded to this. It can get really expensive, so you want to think about being strategic about who you're applying to. What I will say is that you want to make sure that you apply to more than one law school, even if you have a top choice, even if there's this one school that you want to go to and that's the only school, you want to set yourself up for success. And so you want to make sure that you have options. So I generally tell students, you maybe want to look at anywhere between 5 to 12. And the reason I say 12 is, again, I'm looking back to the undergraduate model, right? You want to have maybe like 3 to 5 safety schools, 3 to 5 like competitive, like where you know you fall within their median, and maybe 3 or so reach schools. And that way you have a variety of choices and you'll have options available to you when you start hearing back from law schools in terms of their decisions. So even if there's like this one school, like the school that you want to go to, make sure you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You want to set yourself up for success and have options to choose from. So even at that point, I would say apply to that one school that you're in love with and 4 others, just to give you some background and again, something to fall back on. But if you're really open, again, anywhere from 8 to 12 with a good mix of safety, competitive, and reach schools. But that's my thoughts. Loretto, any thoughts on your end?
I was gonna fall in the same boat, but the same 3 piles, but my number was just a little lower. And I was just thinking, at the end of the day, it all depends on your budget as well. And so if 5 schools is what works for you, you're 2 reach, 2 kind of in your zone, and then that safety school, then definitely do those. I think as we've seen a rise in the volume of applications, we've seen that there are many folks applying all over. And so if you are able to, and if, all of those schools are the match for you, then go for it. I think really that it's something to read when an applicant says, I'm only applying to your school, and you want them to have options in case, their circumstances change in any way. And so that is something also, you're probably applying several months in advance and something might change along the way, and you want to give yourself those options if you can.
All righty, thank you. So we have another question, or a couple more questions. Another one just came in. The first one, I have dropped classes at a prior university due to hardship withdrawals, but I have an exemplary and ascending student record at my current one. How much will this affect my admissions process?
I can quickly start on that one. Again, it'll depend on how each school looks at the transcript. And so for some schools, they do appreciate that upward trend towards the end, and they will give you the benefit of who you are now as a student applying now. That being said, you may also want to address it in whether it's in an addendum or otherwise to give context to what was going on in that time. And usually because we don't have sort of these one-on-ones or interviews without that explicit information, it's really difficult to know why that might have happened. So it depends. If you get a chance to explain it, we encourage you to do so. But otherwise, I think giving you the benefit as much as we can is what we'd hope to do.
So one of the things to remember as well is that most of us do a really holistic approach. So if you think back to some of my comments at the beginning where I was like, take every component of the application seriously, it's because we really do a holistic approach and we take a look at everything that you bring to the table. Loretta hit the nail on the head with looking for trends. We look for upward trends. Unfortunately, sometimes we see downward trends. But we're hoping to get an explanation of that. So there'll be opportunities for you to explain that. But it also means that we are going to look at everything that you bring to the table. So we're going to take a look at your curriculum. We're going to take a look at the resume, the letters of recommendation, the personal statement, all to get a really good idea and picture of your candidacy. So, one thing negative in and of itself may not necessarily hold you back. Again, this is why I always stress, like, take every aspect of the application seriously and do a good job presenting yourself for that. But, and I know Loretta said this, but I'm going to stress it because it's important. If there are big discrepancies or disparities, or like you said, you've dropped, maybe more than 1 or 2 classes, it might raise a red flag. Please explain it. Don't assume that we're going to know why you dropped it or why you withdrew from a class. Like, don't assume any of that. You want to make sure that you explain it so that we know your side of the story rather than making up our own idea of why you might have dropped it or whatnot. So it's hard to say exactly how that might impact your admission because it is a very holistic review and we look at each piece of the puzzle and how they fit together. So it really puts the onus on you to make sure that all other aspects of your application are really on point and put together well.
Alrighty, thank you. I think we still have more time. There's 2 more questions. The next one, how should I evaluate what school is best for me? And how does the location of the school and the programs and costs factor in?
So that's really an excellent question, especially since we were all just talking about trying to narrow down the number of schools you're going to apply to, help to keep costs sort of effective and efficient. I think the best way to evaluate schools, if you can, is to get on campus. I feel like that's really the best way, is to get on campus, talk to students, get a feel of what's happening, what's the vibe. Each school is going to have a vibe. But if you're not able to do that because of distance or COVID, there's going to be different opportunities still for you to gather that. You can reach out to us, the admissions counselors, because we can put you, certainly we can answer your questions, but we can put you in touch with current students who might maybe have similar interests or might be from similar parts of the country. We can put you in touch with alums who have lived through the life of law school. You can ask your questions about what's really important to you and get their insight. Attend different events that schools might have. Some schools actually have regional events, like Seton Hall will do regional events in different parts of the country, California, New York, the middle of the country, where we bring alums there so that it's easier for folks to come. So you really want to make sure, basically, long story short, you want to talk to people that are from or living the life. Don't just rely on the things that you read on the website or the view book. That gives you basic information, but you're not really going to get the feel or the vibe until you talk to folks. So that's a great way to get the information started. But in order to dive into the fit, like Loretta was talking about, it's really important that you talk to people, like students, like faculty, like staff. And you can, if you're trying to figure out how to make those connections, start with the admissions office. And we can always put you in contact with students and alumni. And then really quickly, just on the location of the school and how finances play a role. I feel like in today's day and age, when the world has become smaller and we have become so interconnected, where you go to law school is not necessarily as impactful with regards to whether or not you can get a job, right? Most law schools are now able to really connect folks across the country. I know at Seton Hall, we have alums throughout the entire country, and so folks are really able to make their way and find a career path outside of the region where the law school might be located. So in today's day and age, it's not as important, but it is important in terms of your personal choice, right? So do you want to be in an urban environment? Seton Hall, we're in Newark, we're super urban, right? Very urban, very city-like, 2 blocks from the train station that takes you to New York City in 15 minutes, lots of hustle and bustle. Or are you more, island? I want to say, I'm going to say more island-like. I know you're not in a rural place either, where University of Hawaii, they're very urban too, but maybe like Vermont. I'll use Katie as an example. Vermont is a little bit more rural. It's beautiful. Is that more your environment? So I feel like that's where location plays a role, because you're going to be at law school for either 3 or 4 years if you do the part-time program, and you have to be happy because law school is hard enough. So you don't want to make it any harder. So any last minute thoughts, Loretto, before Katie?
The quick thing I'll add, because you covered a lot of it, would be also think about your support networks. If you need a local support network versus if you have an extended support network near that school, I think that'll be helpful for you to make sure that you have the outside of school support, from family, from good friends, to make sure that you can really get through those tough 3 years or so in law school.
Alrighty, thank you. Due to time, and we have all of our 5 panelists here for the next topic, we're going to move on. However, we do have a couple questions, and we will try to address it towards the end of the entire session. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on, and we will focus on the last topic, which is financing or tips to financing your law degree. And we have representatives from Chapman University, Dale E. Fowler School of Law, New York Law School, University of California, Davis School of Law, University of Utah, S.J. Quinney College of Law, and Vermont Law School. And again, the topic is tips for financing your law degree.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel Moreno. I'm with the University of Utah, S.J. Quinney College of Law, located in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'll be starting us off today with just a brief discussion on basically like the free money, right? Which is really what folks are kind of always mostly after, also a very important part of potentially like the application process, depending on how schools are managing the distribution of those awards. And so essentially there's a few things to consider here. First, like grants, sometimes those are offered by schools. Sometimes those are coming from external sources. Sometimes if you're in an institution similar to us, where the law school is part of, adjoined to like a broader university setting, then we also have some fellowships and things of that nature that come from different units. So not necessarily just from the law school. And so that's also an award potential there, or some financing potential, that money that you basically just don't have to pay back. And so kind of to touch on the merit on entrance scholarships. So these are handled differently depending on the institution. So it's best that you have that individual conversation with your individual schools where you're intending to apply. But broadly speaking, they're usually either awarded at the time of admission or shortly thereafter. In a school like ours, we usually we make the decision that you've been admitted, and you'll find out about scholarships later on. Other schools, like I said, award them at the time that you'll find out about that award at the time that you see your notice of admission. You also have the potential of having an opportunity to submit essentially supplemental applications for specific awards that may not be considered as part of your JD's application. And so just consider that as well. Sometimes it's based off of it's on the basis of the contents you submit within the JD application. Sometimes it's on the basis of what your supplemental application with the merit on entrance, they're kind of what they sound like. They're based off of merit. So LSAT GPA likely play an influential role in that decision-making process. But there might be some, especially with the supplemental applications, some that are more on the basis of like your legal interests, kind of your pursuit, possibly after law school and things of that nature. There are in some schools also the opportunities for need-based scholarships. Those usually require that you complete the FAFSA because they're taking components of or elements of your FAFSA information into consideration for need-based awards. And then finally, you also have opportunities for external awards. And so don't just think about all of the funding coming from the law school or maybe the university. There are potentially some external sources like the local bar associations. If you remember a fraternity, a sorority, things like that, sometimes those have their early or their own funding opportunities, as well as other political organizations, businesses, nonprofit, religious entities, and things of that nature. And a great resource I think that you have access to is Access Lex Databank. They actually created a scholarship databank where you can actually funnel through some of the information of basically a lot of nationwide awards that you can consider outside of the here again, the scholarship opportunities within the schools that you're applying to. And I believe with that, I'm turning it over to Ella.
Hi, everyone. My name is May Estrada, and I am the Associate Dean and Vice President for Enrollment Management and Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at New York Law School. And my segment of the panel is on the financial aid timeline. So before I dive deep into the financial aid timeline, I think it's important to define financial aid. And so financial aid are all of the resources that go into financing your legal education, right? That includes the internal and external scholarships. It includes need-based grants. It includes any veterans benefits that you may qualify for. It includes federal work study. And of course, you have your federal unsubsidized loans, your graduate plus loans, and private loans. And as part of the financial aid timeline, one of the things that I'd like to advise students is to start creating that financial aid portfolio very early on. What does that portfolio look like? That is going to be dependent on how you can access this information easily, how you can organize this information. So it could be electronic, or it could actually be a hard binder where you store the information. And the documents that you will be storing will include copies of the award letters and the terms and conditions of the loans, terms and conditions of the scholarships. These are important paperwork that you will receive either from the law school that you've been admitted to or the lenders that you are working with. So it is critical that you have a place to store all of this information as you collect them throughout your JD education. So now jumping directly into the timeline, I look at it with two lenses. The first is before matriculation, and then the second is after matriculation. So before matriculation, finding out how to finance your legal education, the first thing you should really do is gather the information. A good way to do this is, if you haven't visited the ABA 509 disclosure report, do so. It is required of every law school to complete this. So it is accessible on our website, and it is also accessible on the American Bar Association website. And again, that document is called the ABA 509 disclosure report. Do your scholarship research very early on. As Isabel indicated, there are internal scholarships and there are external scholarships. So one way to do this is to create a spreadsheet for yourself. Column A should include all the law schools that you're interested in. Columns B through how many columns you wish to add should be all of the important components of the law school that you're looking at. And I hope that one of those will include scholarship retention. And again, that information is available to you on the 509 report. And then certainly pull your credit report, pull that earlier on so you understand what your credit score is looking like, if there are any impacts to your credit score that you need to resolve before you even start your legal education. So the FAFSA, federal free application for federal student aid, is available each year in October using your prior year's taxes. So if you are applying for fall 2022, that FAFSA is now available and you can use your 2020 taxes. You keep in mind that you can only list 10 schools on there. So if you are applying for more than 10 schools, just make sure that each of those 10 schools have that information before you delete them and add your next batch of schools. As early as October of November of each year, there are law schools who are already admitting students and setting out decisions. And with that includes, you know, your acceptance letters. And for some schools, they also immediately include any scholarships that you might be available for. Estimated or official financial aid award letters can also happen in, you know, late fall. So now a majority of the law schools will probably start that process early in the new year. And then, of course, other things to be looking out for as part of the financial aid timeline is that the master promissory note is something that is needed for you to complete if you are interested in an unsubsidized or graduate plus loan. Most of the students entering law school will complete that in late spring for schools to certify in the summer. And then online entrance counseling is also a component of your financial aid timeline if you, in fact, are participating in any of the federal student loans. And then certainly in August and September, this is really where the disbursement of the loans happen. And keep in mind, disbursement of loans happen in two segments, in the fall semester and the spring semester. So the Department of Education will funnel the funds directly to the law school. The law school will then assess any tuition and fees before issuing you a refund check if you are eligible for it. And then keep in mind the July 1st deadline, or I'm sorry, the July 1st date, which is every year the interest rate changes for your federal loans. So again, this is important information that you certainly want to keep in your portfolio. Now, what happens after you matriculate, right? We just talked about before matriculation. So usually in August or September, depending on which law school you're attending and when they start, it's a good idea to understand what the process is for deferring your undergraduate student loans or your graduate loans, if you have any. Usually that is done through the registrar's office. For the most part, it is automatic, but it would be in your best interest to understand what that process is for the law school that you are applying to or have been admitted to. And again, this usually takes place in August or September. In October of every year, right, we talked briefly about federal student loans, the unsubsidized and the graduate plus loans. These loans come with origination fees, and these fees are usually assessed in October of each year. Again, another piece of information that you should be aware of and keep in that financial aid portfolio. And then, of course, in your spring of your 1L year, so this is your second semester, this is where students start to plan what their plans are for the summer, and may include federal work study options, another fund that is available in financing your legal education. So please work directly with either your academic or career planning advisors, and certainly the financial aid office at each law school to understand what those options are for you. And then really, once you get into law school, you want to start to think about or put away money aside for your bar expenses or any other law school educational related expenses. So you will often hear in the financial aid world, cost of attendance, right? These are components that affect your budget, or these are components that go into the budget. But there's also the cost of legal education. So somewhat different. A cost of legal education may be other components that are not factored into that cost of attendance, such as your bar expenses. These are bar expenses are not funded by the federal government. You often have to take a private loan to finance your bar related expenses, including the living expenses where you from the time that you've graduated up until the time you take the bar. So it's crucial to start planning ahead of time, putting money aside to help finance these very important activities. And then your third year of law school is what we call an exit interview. It is a requirement if you have taken any federal loans. Some of them are done in person, some through a written survey, but this happens in your third year that again talks about your rights, your responsibilities as a borrower. And then after you graduate, certainly after the bar exam, you want to reach out to your loan servicer or provider to better understand what the different payment plans are, terms and conditions of paying back your loans. Your loans will hit repayment status 6 months after graduation. So if you are graduating in May, then it hits in November. So understanding it before it actually happens is critical. And with that, I will turn it over to my next panelist.
Thanks, May. So Isabel got to talk about the fund free money. I'm going to quickly talk about the money you have to pay back, and those are loans. May just alluded to them. There are the federal programs, which is the federal direct unsubsidized loan and the direct graduate plus loan. And then there's also private loans if you need them. It's important to remember that either through the federal program or private loans, these are pieces of financial aid that require repayment with varying terms and conditions. So hopefully you've been paying attention to that all along and you know what you're getting yourself into. They follow you around forever, it feels like. But the loans do need to be paid back after you graduate. As was just noted, you have about 6 months until you start making payments. In most senses, in most cases, note that the loan amount you request, in addition to like everything else that you may have been awarded, cannot exceed the cost of tuition. That's, you want to speak to your school specifically. It's also important to note that international students and undocumented students are not eligible for federal student loans, but there might be other options. So again, communicate with the schools that you've been accepted to see what can be done specifically. So once you decide what you need to borrow, and you should always borrow very wisely and carefully because you have to pay all of it back. There are some programs on the backside after you graduate in terms of repayment. The federal government does do income-based repayment. There's a few different programs that you can look at and are explained. They break it down for you if you go to studentaid.gov. The ABA counts about 100 U.S. law schools that participate in what's called the Loan Repayment Assistance Program, or LRAP, just one more acronym for the business. And this is usually school specific. They provide assistance to their graduates to help you in your repayment. So it's usually capped with a certain income in your first kind of years out of law school. And if you're making your payments, then they will kind of help you fund that. There's lots of talk in the news and stuff about public service loan forgiveness. It is a program that's still there, hopefully continues to be there. Hopefully more will be able to take advantage of it. But if you are employed in certain federal, state, local, tribal governments, or not-for-profit agencies, you might be eligible for this program. It requires you to make 120 on-time payments while you're, in a qualifying repayment program and for a qualifying employer. So that can also help you with your repayment of your loans. So I will turn it over to Katie now.
Thank you. Aloha from not an island, but our students from Hawaii feel like they're on an island with our green trees. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do while you're in law school to subsidize a little bit of your pocket money. The first thing I want to talk about is federal work study. It's a federally funded program that allows you to work at the law school while you are attending law school. Typically, the ABA does not like you to work during law school, but generally your second and third years, you can qualify for work study. I have a wonderful work study in the next room who's doing some data work for me. You can work at the library, you can be a note taker. There's a number of areas on campus. I think here at Vermont Law, everyone loves the library and fitness center because you can also study while you're working. So it's a good thing to look at when you're applying to law schools on their work study program. The other thing I want to talk about is, some people might want to close their ears. If you do work a little in law school, I would do something start charging your sister for babysitting, okay? It's time, you're in law school, you need the money, it's okay. 20 bucks an hour, go for it. So anything you can do on the side that really doesn't take from your law school education is house sitting's always a good one, babysitting, anything along those lines. And I'm a big believer in the 1% rule. 1%, just if you do a little bit here, a little bit there, it all adds up to 100%. So federal work study, a little tiny not stressful, because your real job is law school first and foremost, but just something maybe little. And like watch your pennies. With that, I'm going to send it over to Nicole from Chapman Law.
Thanks, Katie. So I have maybe a less fun topic to talk about than loans, which is kind of budgeting and saving up for law school itself. So specifically, many of you probably have a couple years down the line before you're beginning law school. Even if you are starting law school perhaps within the next year or so, next August, it's never too late to start thinking about pinching those pennies. And like Katie mentioned, literally every single dollar does count. And if you think about it, every dollar that you save now is just less money that you'll need to take out in loans, and with compounding interest and all of those really big scary words that we won't go into too much in this segment, you really do want to think about how every single dollar that you save now is going to be impacting you, long-term down the line once you're actually graduated from law school. So really, we do encourage you to start living like a law student now as you get ready to go to law school. The phrase that you might have heard is kind of live like a law student now to live like a lawyer later. And we do believe in that. So, taking the time to set up a Google spreadsheet and, start learning how to budget, and maybe setting up a budget for yourself that you will follow while you're in law school. Laying all the groundwork now is just going to pay off so much more later down the line. So if you spend the next few months or maybe the next couple of years, setting a budget for yourself, learning how to, track all the pennies that come in and out of your bank account and where every single dollar you spend is going, might sound tedious, might sound like a lot of work. But in law school, you really are going to be doing yourself a favor when it comes to, taking out less money in student loans. So that's kind of all of the, little tips and tidbits that I had, is really just about learning how to set a good budget. If you Google around and learn about different kind of budgeting techniques in terms of X percentage of your income should be devoted towards this, Y percentage of your income should be going towards your savings, etc. You can find lots of good resources out there. That's something that I did for myself a few years ago and said, with this income, how much should I be able to spend on, food per month? How much should I be able to spend on rent? There are tons of really good rules of thumb out there. So before you, start diving into law school and you'll be overwhelmed and busy and won't have time to kind of lay the groundwork ahead of time, I would advise you to start thinking about that earlier rather than later, and just kind of start laying the foundation so that by the time that you begin law school and are actually enrolled in your classes, you will have that already done for you, and you kind of know how much of your student loans should be going towards things like transportation, food, rent, textbooks, things like that. So there's lots of resources out there. I would encourage you to take a little bit of time poking around and see what that looks like for you, because it does look different for every student. It'll depend where you're going to law school. It'll depend on the geographic region, right? If you're going to somewhere a little bit more rural, you could expect housing to most likely be less expensive than if you're living in a huge city. There's lots of factors that do come into play there. So it's kind of all the little tidbits that I had. I know my other panelists and colleagues have shared lots of great tips about financial planning and advice, and how to pay. So I think I'm going to leave my end at that. And I think I was the last panelist for this session. So I'm going to turn it back over to our hosts, and then I will see everyone in the Q&A to answer additional questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's a great information. So right now we'll open it up for any Q&A for this particular topic, which it was tips on financing your law degree. Please put it into the Q&A. And again, all panelists are welcome to respond typing. And any of the panelists here on screen, of course, you can go live if there are any questions. We have one. Would you recommend any books, mentors, or services that could help my budget or me budget my law career?
I just put something in the chat. I would recommend accesslex.org. They have great budgeting tools from what you can do now until what you can do after law school. So that's where I would go first.
And I would just add that, reach out to the financial aid offices at the various law schools that you're interested in. They are resources, and they can help point you into various directions to help finance your legal education.
I just want to make a note on like the books and things like that. Maybe don't rush too much too quickly, like to buy those books. I know, for instance, like with our students, they like to gift their 1L books off to the first year students when they can. I mean, some students are not in a financial position to do that. They also internally sell their books to each other at a substantially lower rate than if you were to buy them on other retailer sources like Amazon or things like that, even cheaper than maybe even renting them. And so maybe with textbooks and supplements and things like that, don't rush too much. I would also add that your libraries can sometimes serve as a resource. I know, for instance, like with our library specifically, if the faculty member that's teaching your particular course has their course book on reserve, then you'll be able to just check it out through there. I know we have some students that like to do that. They don't like to bring their books here, so they'll check it out from the resource, from our library just for the time they're in class, and then they'll send it back in, or they scan the book if they don't want to necessarily purchase the text. So just kind of some tidbits there on books.
All righty. Thank you. So we actually have some time, and we have 3 panelists that joined us a little late because of the time difference. So we'll go ahead and let them address their topics. So I'll go ahead and introduce them. And then what's going to happen is we'll have a time for general Q&A. So the first panelist is Christine from the University of Colorado Law. And I'll give you some time, Christine, to go ahead and address the topic on why law school. So you can go ahead and turn on your camera. Is Christine there? I see her as a panelist. Is she online? Okay, if she's not, I'm actually going to move on. I have 2 other panelists. We have Neffin from Harvard Law School and Allison from Albany Law School. If you can go ahead and turn on your camera.
Sure. Thank you, Kay. I'm here. I'm not able to turn my video on. I think the host might have to do that, but I'm also happy
hold
to.
on.
Okay.
Give me some time. Okay, Allison too. Okay. Let's see. Oh, look. Yay, there you are.
Hello, hello.
Stefan, hello. Yes, and we have Allison. Okay, so your topic, it was tips for applying to law school. So we'll give you a few minutes. And, either of you can go.
Sure. Well, I apologize for not being here earlier on that. So I'm not sure what some of the other tips that were given. And so one thing that I really advise students is that when you're applying to law schools, that you really have to show your positives. And I apologize if this is a repetition of something that's been said. And a lot of times I have students who they're concerned about a certain aspect of their application. Maybe it's test scores or a GPA. And they sometimes will send addendums or point out, hey, I know this is not really great, or I know that this looks concerning. And I really think you have to have a positive tone throughout your application. And so, if you're a student where maybe you're not feel great about your test scores, but you have other areas that you feel have overcome that my GPA is at this, or really show your strengths. And, if you're speaking about yourself in a negative manner in your personal statement or your addendums, you're kind of giving that vibe off to the reviewers who are viewing your file. They're going to say, oh, that's kind of a red flag. And I know this might sound funny, but I tell students that how I explain it is don't point out your zits. And it may sound funny because there's times where you're like, you feel like you have this huge zit. So usually you wear something you're more comfortable with, or you do something else to try to hide that and overcome it. And when you see your best friend, you always immediately tell them, and they're like, I wouldn't have noticed that if you didn't tell me. So that's kind of when you're reviewing your application and you're looking at all of your documents, and you have finished your statements, ask yourself, am I pointing out my zits? Am I pointing out my weaknesses? Or am I articulating to the schools what my strengths are, why I'm ready for law school, why, well, they see something about my application or my documents that could be concerning, but I'm going to give them more information about me that's positive, so they can say, you know what, yes, maybe this student isn't on our medians or above for GPA or for LSAT, but they have all of this experience, or they have done these things, or look at how they've performed or had this opportunity. So I think that's really my biggest tip that I send to students is just before you press submit, make sure you don't have any zits showing on there, you've covered them all up, and you speak about yourself in a positive manner, and you're showing your strengths. Just like if you're on a job interview, you want to talk highly of all your experiences that you've done. You want to show I'm capable of this and I'm ready for this challenge. And have your friends look at it. And if your friend notices your zit while they're reviewing your file, or your advisor or anything, well, now you have to go get some cover up, and you got to fix that. But it's really about focusing on the positives in your file. So that's kind of my biggest tip for it, and making sure that visit the schools, or speak to admissions counselors at the schools that you're applying to make sure that you know what they're looking for competitive applicants, and seeing, is this going to be a right fit for me? Can I be a competitive applicant? Am I one of their competitive applicants? And how can I put that out in my application? And then just also the fact that I feel that most of us who work in admissions really want to help students achieve their goals, and that we're looking for those positive pieces to be able to give to the final review committee to say, yes, this is why this student, put those words on your application that we can utilize to move you forward. But thank you so much for having me. Hopefully I wasn't repetitive. Nobody probably talked about zits. So I hope that I gave a nice insight there to help some students through the process.
I love that, Allison. I also want to echo what you said about owning your strengths and playing to your strengths in the admissions process. I think it's worth naming. And even if it was something that was mentioned earlier, I think it bears repeating. So definitely on the same page there with you. My two biggest pieces of advice fall into two buckets, y'all. I think the first thing I will say, to echo what might have already been said, do your homework, literally, and then also do your homework on the schools that you're applying to. Make sure that you're following the instructions that each individual school has, so that you're putting yourself forward in the best way possible. Lawyering is very precise work. You have to follow rules and timelines and deadlines. So make sure that you've done the necessary pre-work and research on the schools that you're applying to, so you know the specific prompts and deadlines they're looking for. To channel my earlier professional self, I used to work in pre-K through third grade education briefly. I would always tell my students, read the instructions and then also check your work. Make sure before you click submit that you really are, again, putting a really carefully put together story that you're submitting to the admissions committee. The second bucket of advice, I think, centers around the idea of being yourself. There are so many legal issues in this world today, ranging from the over monocropping of the island of Hawai'i to questions around election security in the Southeast where I am from. And so we need people from all different kinds of backgrounds, academically, personally, and professionally, who want to come to law school, to learn the law, to work on all of these different issues. So own your path, be authentic, and be yourself. Speaking for myself and for my school, we want to know who you are, not who you think we want you to be when you're applying. And so I think if you channel that authenticity, owning again, maybe some of those warts that you may have that were referenced earlier, but also owning your strengths, owning the path that has brought you to this application, I think you're going to set yourself up for success. So read those instructions, check your work, and be yourself. And I'll leave it there. Really looking forward to speaking with you all in some of the smaller breakouts. And again, really appreciative of this opportunity to come together with colleagues from across the Zoom universe. Thank you again, and definitely do stay in touch.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to ask all panelists if you can turn on your camera. We will have some time now to address just general or any questions, and any of you can answer. And again, please do also answer live, and then if some of you want to type it in as well. So for attendees, you feel free to post questions in our Q&A section, and we'll have our amazing panelists respond. So it looks like there is a question here. Oh, okay, never mind. I think it was answered, and it looked like it was about the LSAT. Any other questions? Feel free. All righty, we see no other questions. Is there anything that any of the panelists would like to add at this time, since we do have a few more minutes before the breakout sessions?
I can just add that for attendees, thank you so much for listening in today, and also just you should view this as maybe the beginning of your education about law schools. And all of the law schools on this panel, I'm sure, have like a great website and maybe printed materials and information sessions. So certainly you can look to our websites for information on how to learn more about our schools.
All right, thank you, Susan. Actually, there is a question that came into chat. I think the attendee had deleted the question in Q&A. And so I'm going to go ahead and read it out. Do you recommend LSAT prep courses? How important is GPA when applying to law school compared to LSAT score or community involvement? And following an acceptance, what does being a law school student look like? What are the hours like? So these are like 3 or 4 different questions. And you can refer to the questions in chat. Anyone open to any panelists?
I can start with the GPA, because I think that it's really important to understand the GPA is a number, but it's really very different. Well, we might see a 3.3. We understand your GPA is going to differ widely based upon the classes you take, the major you chose, the strength of the school you go to. Your GPA, we're going to see your GPA by semester. We're going to see your GPA by undergraduate institutions that you attended. You may have taken one summer course for 4 credits at a local school. We are going to see your GPA in comparison to the rest of your class, what percentile you're in. But one of the things we look at the most when we really drill down at this is we look at what classes did you take, right? So many times we see, like, we'll talk about the ZIT in the room, right? You might start out pre-med and just go after your first semester or after organic chemistry, go, oh my gosh, I do not want to be a pre-med. And you find your passion is poli-sci. And then we see your trajectory go up and your GPA, you nail it. We look for that strength and that resilience. So again, write an addendum and show us and explain to us that, so we can put that GPA in context, because it's not just a number. We do drill down and we do look specifically at how you did each semester. And if you do have a hiccup or a bump in the road, explain it to us. You may have had a personal issue. Someone may have been sick. We've all dealt with COVID. We're here to try and see your academic strength. So your GPA is one of the best ways to show that to us.
Yeah, I would just add that, for my school, and this is probably true for most panelists, if not all, we really review the application holistically. I think it was talked about a little bit earlier. So again, just to underscore, the GPA in the context of your whole academic transcript, is important, but it is just one aspect. And so if you're a little bit weaker in that area, maybe you're stronger in another. And so that would tend to be balanced out by maybe your resume, your personal statement, your letters of recommendation, and other items.
Heidi, thank you. We have another question or two others. If you are a reverse splitter where your GPA is above median, but the LSAT score is very below median, how does this affect chances of admission?
I think that really depends on the institution that you're applying to and the rest of your application. I think this is where that holistic approach really, when students have files like that, and it's really how you put the information forward. Is there a reason for that, that LSAT score being what that is? At my school, Albany, if students have that issue, we say, we look at your highest and greatest score. So are you going to attempt another LSAT? I know there was the question also of, is LSAT prep important? Yes, like LSAT, don't go into a test cold if you don't have to. And there also are free resources as well. And we can connect you to those. So really, when you're talking about being a splitter, you really have to put a comprehensive application together, reach out to the schools you're specifically applying to, and also looking at the institutions where are you still kind of within their ranges, even as a splitter. That may be how you're, devising your list of schools even to apply to that you'd be a good candidate, because you also have to understand, and I think the other question somebody had asked from a different question is, what does it look like when you become accepted? You're going to be graded on a curve against these peers, and you want to be at a similar academic level as your peers as well, because you want to be successful in law school. So that's where your academic background and your abilities, it's going to matter once you get into law school, and especially against your peers. I think, like Patricia mentioned, also with the pool of applicants that are in there as well. So, really looking at the list and having conversations with the schools you're applying to will give you more insight as to kind of how you'll be competitive at that institution in their applicant pool.
I really do think that I think it's so important for everyone to know that most people applying to law schools are splitters. And so I think everything that was just said is super important in terms of just context. I think it's really important to look at the data. I think May Estrada mentioned this 509 report. And so that gives you a really broad sense of the statistical profile of the law schools you may be interested in. And so I think putting all of this in context, it really is about how do you frame the rest of your application. So depending on what a specific law school on the Zoom might be focusing on that year, that may differentiate what you need to do in terms of your letters of recommendation, or what you focus on in an addenda or an optional essay and things of that nature. So I think it really is contextual. And I think that it's really important for you to do your homework and kind of be prepared to craft your strategy for each law school you're applying to around what that might look like in each application cycle for each school, because it really does change every year. Some schools are pretty consistent with their stats, but the reality is that for many of us, we do fluctuate and go up and down and things of that nature. And so again, I think context matters. And I really do think that it's important for you to think about how you're going to frame the rest of your application as it relates to those numbers and the goals of that institution that year. So lastly, what this means is that you can't be a slacker in this process, meaning you can't craft one application for all 15, 20, 25 schools you're applying to. It really does mean that based on your profile, based on all the other things you're bringing to the table, how will you frame those things in the application process for each individual school to kind of highlight your strengths and what else you bring to the table, while acknowledging that maybe you have a score or an issue that might not be the best reflection of who you are and your capabilities.
All right, so due to time, I'm actually going to address one last question. We have a little bit of time, and I believe someone actually responded over type or text message, but I would like to hear this live as well. How can I best differentiate myself as an applicant?
Follow directions.
I was going to say fill out the optional essays that schools require.
I just said, and I wrote this in the typo, I was the one that typed it and it disappeared from the Q&A, was show us your true, unique, and authentic self. Be authentic, tell us your story. I think Trish followed up with like, show us your best you. I think that's what we're looking for. There's so many parts of the application that give us your demographic background, your numbers, your race, your ethnicity, like where you grew up, all those numerical things. But what we're really looking for that can help you stand out is who you really are and what you bring to the table beyond what we can just see in that paper, right? So I'm going to steal Trish's line in terms of like, show us your best you and tell us who you are and who you're going to be in that classroom next to everyone else.
All righty, thank you. So we are nearing 10:30, and that is the time that we allotted for our attendees to attend the breakout sessions. So the second part of the fair will be our virtual booths or breakout sessions, which will consist of individual schools or programs holding their own Zoom meetings to meet with potential students and share about their specific programs, as well as some time for Q&A. The Zoom booth information for all schools or programs will be sent to your email. And one of our MCC staff will also be posting a link in the chat, or it's already there, allowing you to access all the Zoom links, meeting IDs, and passwords. Please enjoy your time with these representatives. And please remember to meet with a career counselor for assistance with applying to law schools. And thank you to all our panelists.